Thank you for the opportunity to present today on investment and green growth. My name is Matthew Stevenson, and I lead the Global Investment Policy and Practice Initiative at the World Economic Forum. It is a pleasure to share what we have learned regarding innovative, sustainable investment policies and measures, and to discuss how we can use these to kickstart a green and resilient recovery. My presentation is structured in 3 parts. First, asking and suggesting an answer to the elliptical question, what is sustainable investment? Second, once we know what it is, asking the question, what can governments do to support sustainable investment? Third, how can we move from strategy to implementation, from talk to action? First, what is sustainable investment? Today, I'll use the term sustainable rather than green as a broad term to capture environmental and climate goals. Sustainable can be seen as broader than just green, for instance, by including labor practices or gender inclusion. But for the purposes of today's discussion on green growth, I'll be referring to environmental sustainability. Is sustainable investment in certain sectors? For instance, energy, transport, water, agriculture, or especially related infrastructure? Investment in infrastructure is often seen as a key to green growth, given that infrastructure decisions today have repercussions for the duration of the infrastructure's lifespan and an especially large effect on climate change. Or perhaps sustainable investment is investment that doesn't necessarily fall within a specific sector, but contributes to green growth, whether carbon transition, adaptation, or mitigation. For instance, investment in a bank that provides green bonds would qualify in this case as sustainable investment. Or still another possibility is that sustainable investment is investment that follows certain guidelines or principles, while at the same time helping contribute to sustainable development. Sustainable investment, I would say, can be all of the above. However, I would argue that sustainable investment can be in any sector, or in other words, is sector agnostic. What is important is that such investment follows certain guidelines or principles and contribute to green goals. So what can governments do to support sustainable investment? This is what we have come to talk about today. And here I would like to first provide a framework with examples of specific tools or measures, and then talk about some of the key measures in more detail. A sustainable investment framework can help align efforts among different actors. In other words, policymakers and firms need a clear picture of the different channels to pursue sustainable investment and the different tools at their disposal before those channels and tools can be effectively implemented. We have developed a framework that sees sustainable investment as comprising 5 complementary and mutually reinforcing dimensions. Sustainable investment policies are key to creating the underlying framework for investment to take place in alignment with environmental principles. An example of a tool are standards and guidelines, and integrating these in domestic and international frameworks. You can see sustainable investment policies on the top left. Then moving to the right, sustainable finance mobilization entails increasing the flow of sustainable capital to certain activities. This requires stakeholders have the information regarding sustainable behavior of different firms. In this way, policymakers, regulators, investors, media, civil society, and other actors can reward sustainable behavior and condemn unsustainable behavior, which aligns market mechanisms with development goals. An example of a tool here is environmental reporting by firms. Moving along, sustainable investment promotion can drive sustainable investment by, for instance, targeting investors in sectors that are particularly conducive to green growth, targeting investors with a sustainability mission, or creating a pipeline of sustainable bankable projects. Here, in sustainable investment promotion, an example of a tool are investment incentives made conditional on the sustainability behavior of firms, or in other words, behavioral incentives. And then moving to sustainable investment facilitation. Sustainable investment facilitation can drive sustainable investment by providing greater facilitation services and support to investment that is aligned with sustainability goals. An example of a tool here is the use of guarantees or insurance to support and protect sustainable investment. Finally, sustainable development impact involves measures to maximize the sustainability impact from investment. This can take place through indicators to monitor and measure impact, coupled with stakeholder engagement. An example of a tool is the use of environmental impact assessments to evaluate projects and ensure they align with environmental principles that we talked about in the beginning. Another tool is the use of supplier development programs to forge linkages between foreign and domestic firms. And here you can see those example tools aligned with the Sustainable Investment Framework in the different dimensions. But what is important to realize is that all of these tools can be designed and implemented to achieve sustainability goals. How? And here's where we go into a little more detail. First, policymakers may wish to include standards and guidelines, for instance, from the OECD, in domestic frameworks and international investment agreements. Economies have started to do so in domestic frameworks already. But what is new is that these standards are increasingly being included in international investment agreements. By doing so, it will help ensure that investment follows these standards and guidelines. Second, reporting. Policymakers can encourage the adoption of sustainability reporting requirements for firms above a certain size. Reporting, as we mentioned, is essential for stakeholders to allocate capital according to societal values, with firms that score well being rewarded with greater investment. Third, align incentives with sustainability behavior of firms. Governments can either make incentives conditional on sustainability behavior, one could call this a form of stick, or provide additional incentives to firms that make more of a contribution to sustainable development, a form of carrot in the traditional stick and carrot dichotomy. Fourth, provide guarantees or insurance for sustainable investments, or consider providing additional support to firms that invest sustainably beyond only providing investment incentives. Everyone always focuses on investment incentives, but there are many other measures that can provide support to sustainable decisions and activities. For instance, to provide some examples of other types of measures beyond incentives, this can include faster regulatory approvals, or targeted aftercare services, or public recognition. Fifth, adopt a number of practical steps to create linkages between foreign firms and local firms. These can focus on linkages between firms that operate in the green economy. Specific tools can include databases or supplier development programs. For instance, by including in databases which firms operate sustainably. These are called supplier databases with sustainability dimensions, and some economies are starting to roll these out, such as in Cambodia. Or helping develop suppliers have the capacity to operate sustainably through capacity development programs and supplier development programs, and thus be listed in the database as operating in a green way. Now you might say to me, Matthew, in the current context of FDI falling about 40% due to the pandemic, this is not the right time to include additional measures to encourage sustainable behavior that might slow or even hamper these flows. Let's wait until FDI is back up and running before considering these new measures. I would suggest it would be a mistake to think this way for two reasons. First, these measures can improve the investment climate and thus can support an increase in the level of investment, especially over the long term. Consumers want to know their firms are following international standards and guidelines with respect to the environment. They increasingly reward such behavior with greater consumption of goods and services by such firms. Firms would be happy to have the option of additional incentives for additional sustainability operations. And firms thirst for linking with qualified domestic suppliers, including those that operate sustainably, as one of the most important criteria in selecting a market in which to invest. Second, this is an opportunity to reshape the system. It's when the factory line has stopped, when investment is down, that you can change the belts and bolts and reset it. Once it's going again, it will be more difficult. So this is an opportunity to change the bolts to those made of a stronger material, or in other words, adopt investment measures that will make more of a contribution to sustainability and sustainable development. So how can we move from strategy to implementation, from talk to action? Together with a number of partners, the World Economic Forum is working to stand up a new public-private alliance to increase sustainable investment flows. The Alliance to Enable Action on Sustainable Investment, or EASY, will aim to grow sustainable investment flows through both national and regional projects that systematically identify and address bottlenecks through public-private expert collaboration. I like to say that the EASY Alliance aims to make investment easy. The EASY Alliance will leverage an expected WTO agreement on investment facilitation for development that is currently being negotiated at the WTO. And this is modeled on the successful Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, also a public-private alliance, which has pioneered this approach to help implement and benefit from the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. The Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation has projects in over a dozen countries around the world and is scaling rapidly in all regions, and the Global Alliance on Sustainable Investment can do the same over time. These kinds of projects can make a difference by specifically seeing what is holding back sustainable investment flows and then taking targeted intervention to address those bottlenecks. We are currently discussing with governments, firms, international organizations, experts, and others on how best to stand up the EASY Alliance, how to make it most useful to move from strategy to implementation. And we are looking forward to working with key actors across the Mediterranean region on this new effort. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to exchanging on these issues. Thank you.